Hello, BookTube. I'm here with my first video of 28 days of SF. Well, it's not going to be all SF, but there will be a bit of horror near the end. And I'm starting out with these two bookcases here are nonfiction SF. And I'm starting with a shelf which is just outside a camera there. But you can see Edgar peeking in, so he's keeping an eye over my shoulder. And I do apologize for the light, the lamps. I moved it around. It was perfect a month or so ago when I was videoing. It lit things up correctly, and I can't get it back. And that was just happenstance. But anyway, let's move on, and we'll go shelf by shelf. Hence, 28 days, 28 shelves. Makes sense, doesn't it? Almost everything is up here at the moment. There's still some books that I can't quite locate. So hopefully they will come to light and I haven't lost them in the move. But so far, I have not been able to find them. But let's start with the first one. And I've got it sort of organized in a way. Like the first shelf is sort of a history of science fiction, and it continues on. I think it does down here a little bit. And then it goes into sort of bibliographies, more or less bibliographies, encyclopedias, and then here is sort of some reviews, and that's sort of critical aspects of science fiction for a couple of shelves. Then it goes into individual studies of science fiction authors, and then over here, that continues with studies of science fiction authors. Way up top is Isaac Asimov. Here is a shelf about the history of magazines, more or less. And then it goes into sort of TV science fiction. Then we get into a little bit of horror, film, and things like that. TV, film, science fiction, and horror. And along the bottom are just large books. And then off to the side here is sort of all my fiction in the third and fourth bookcase with my Simac and everything else. We'll get to it eventually, but let's start. I've taken off everything off the first shelf, so that's why there's an angle here, because I've laid it out here because there's no way I can stand up. I can barely reach up to the shelf. Now this is, as I say, history. This is The World Beyond the Hill by Alexei and Corey Panshin. I've shown this before and I've talked about this. This is an absolutely fabulous history of sort of the golden age of science fiction, of magazine science fiction. It's everything you would ever want. It was published by Jeremy P. Tarcher, Incorporated, in 1989. There was a limited signed edition that Corey and Alexei and Corey put out. But Alexei Panshin, he died, sadly, in August, I think it was, 2022. And he was an author of a number of books, fiction as well. His biggest fiction book is Rite of Passage, which won the Nebula. It didn't win, for some reason, the Hugo Award, but it came close. And he's written other things. Like he wrote a book about Heinlein, which I have, which we'll actually get to. You can see the biography of Heinlein, so it's right around here somewhere. Heinlein went berserk about it. So that's quite interesting. We'll get to it. And just other things about science fiction, but it took him, like, I don't know how many years, him and his wife, reading through every sort of bit of science fiction and science fiction history to create this. The World Beyond the Hill, Science Fiction and the Quest for Transcendence. But it goes right back and talks about earlier proto-science fiction as well. And I can't recommend it enough. Another one along the same lines is Brian W. Aldiss's Billion Year Spree, The History of Science Fiction. This is the British first edition, Weidfeld and Nicholson. And it's actually signed by Brian Aldiss. And this was published in 1973. I also have, it's on the shelf because I might as well put it there, a little corgi paperback of it that I've had for a long time. That's the one that I originally read, and I've been able to pick up the signed edition. But later on, it was expanded to A Trillion Year Spree, and it's under the name of Brian W. Aldiss, but most of the stuff is David Wingrove, the extra stuff. And this is an American edition, I think. Yeah, the Athenaeum 1986, and it actually belonged to Brian Aldiss. And there's a little sticker in here. Wendy Aldiss, his daughter, the literary executor of Brian Aldiss' estate, and she notes this. So that's kind of cool to have. I've got the Billion Year Spree signed by him and A Trillion Year Spree that belonged to him. But he must have kept it in his shed, because there's a bit of foxing on the page edges. But it's a good history as well. I prefer the Lexi and Corey Pansion, but that's very, it's quite American centric. The World Beyond the Hill, and Billion Year Spree and Trillion Year Spree is a little more. It's a little more rounded, but there's issues they have with each other. Like, you know, they choose different things to emphasize, and that's why they're both great to have. Now, a more recent book called Astounding. Everybody seems to know this. Alec Novella Lee. And it's John W. Campbell, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, L. Ron Hubbard in the Golden Age of Science Fiction. It's interesting, but there are so many errors in this thing. I read it through and I caught, like, you know, half a dozen things just on the fly. And then I was looking something else up, and I was looking at his references, and he doesn't reference certain things, and he misrepresents many items in here. There's a lot of factual errors in here. So, and I kind of wonder if I actually, you know, if the stuff that I know and that I saw, and what about the stuff that I don't know and I haven't seen? That's the key. And he just takes all the bad stuff and emphasizes everything of the bad, and without anything else. There's so much other stuff they could do with this, but they don't. Now, the next two are sort of, like I say, some of this stuff doesn't quite fit into the history, but this I have put there. The first volume, it's by Sam Moskowitz, science fiction in old San Francisco. It's a history of the movement from 1854 to 1890 by Sam Moskowitz. We'll see his name come up quite a bit in this collection. I do like his writing, even though it has problems with factual evidence as well, and misemphasizing certain things. But anyway, this is basically, it's documented history of lost science fiction and fantasy movement, which originated on the West Coast during the latter half of the 19th century. Special emphasis is given to its prime mover, Robert Duncan Milne, who produced at least 60 stories of science fiction over a 20-year period, during which he enjoyed unprecedented popularity. And a lot of it was done in magazines. So you get the history sort of in the first volume, and then we get a selection of a lot of the stories by Robert Duncan Milne in volume 2. So that's quite interesting, and I still haven't made my way through fully through those. The next one is quite interesting. It's a he was an academic, and I put all the stuff here except his bibliography, but it's I.F. Clarke, and this is edited by I.F. Clarke. It's The Tale of the Next Great War, 1871 to 1914. He was very interested in future stories, stories set in the future. Not always science fiction per se, but set in the future. And this is a collection of the future war stories, and a lot of them have to do with war with Germany, and there was a lot of actually pretty good prediction of time sometimes, and with how things actually happened. So it's very interesting to do this. And it's like fictions of future warfare and a battle still to come. And this is part of the Liverpool science fiction texts and studies. The original editor was David Seed. I don't know who's the editor now. I think he's retired. But I had a chance to buy his reference library, but I couldn't do it. It was mostly paperbacks, and it would have been really, really heavily used, but it would have been cool to have his reference library. But yeah, and so this is one of the volumes, and we continue on with I.F. Clarke, uh, with the Great War with Germany, 1890 to 1914. Again, edited by, and as I say, it's a collection, but it's also there's a history within this, so hence I've put it in the history section. I may change that at some point. As I say, it's a bit of a loose categorization, because I had to categorize them somehow, or at least I thought I did. So here we go. The other one was published, as I say, Liverpool. It's Liverpool University, or the University of Liverpool. I always get that wrong. Liverpool University Press, 1995, for The Tale of the Next Great War. And this one is also Liverpool text, and this was published in 1997. And then we've got a few more of his. We've got Voices Prophesizing War. Well, actually, let's look at the first edition of this. Voices Prophesizing War, 1763 to 1984. And this was published by Oxford University Press in 1966. And again, it's more of a history of, from the Napoleonic Wars in the age of ballooning onwards, the idea of striking future developments in warfare has seized the imagination of certain writers and artists at times, and has loomed large in the public mind. Mr. Clarke traces the story in both its political and its technical aspects through tales like the Battle of Dorking, the Riddle of the Sands, and so on. And then it was revamped for Oxford, and its Voice of Prophesizing Future, and it's an artist rendering actually of War of the Worlds, I believe, on the cover, and it's Future War 1763 to 3749, not 1984, but 3749. And it's just, it's the literature of the future wars, and this was done in 1992. And the jacket is Martin Hargreaves, but I'm pretty sure that's for the War of the Worlds. So, and then we got one last one of his here. As I say, he did a bibliography of future books, and we'll see that on this shelf. On the third day, we should see it. And this one is A Pattern of Expectation, 1644 to 2001. This was published by Jonathan Cape in 1979. And its discussion of the future is a working tool for some and a plaything of imagination for others. In this remarkable book, the result of 25 years of research, Professor Clarke traces the evolving patterns of prediction. He shows how the factors making for change in the society, political, social, and technological, philosophical, decide the pattern of expectation from generation to generation. And it says here he's chairman of the Department of English Studies at the University of Strathclyde, but he has passed away now. But he also did an edited collection. It's either 8 or 10 volumes, I can't remember now. It's still in print, but it's in the crappy plasticized covers and print on demand that are super expensive, but it's British future fiction, I think it's called. It's either 8 or 10 volumes. I really, really would love to get that set because that would be really cool to have. Okay, sorry, I do have to lean over here to reach the other books. Now we've got a history by a non-sort of professional, Brian Ash. This is Faces of the Future, The Lessons of Science Fiction. And it's an interesting little book. He worked in public relations in the oil and photographic industries, a major national charity and local government, now full-time freelance writer. And he writes, and it says here that he was, in 1966, was publicity organizer for the H.G. Wells Centenary. And this is science fiction, at least as much as any other literary genre, deals with the widest concerns of humanity, future forms of political organization, race relations, religions, and nature of oppression, and of good and evil. The future evolution of man are themes treated in today's science fiction, as well as human interaction with machines, parapsychology, and the possibility of encounters with alien minds. Now, it's his personal sort of view of what science fiction is in the 20th century. This was published, this is a British edition, Elk Pemberton, published in 1975. And he goes through the history of science fiction, mostly 20th century, but it does go further back. And as I say, it was just something that I thought was a bit of an oddity. Now we get into fandom. Now, to me, this is Sam Moskowitz. It's The Immortal Storm, A History of Science Fiction Fandom by Sam Moskowitz. And there he is there. He, in 1939, sort of helped, I think it was 1939, helped sort of organize the first World Science Fiction Convention, but that was only in New York City. And this is published by Advent Publishers. Which is a publisher. No, actually, sorry, it's not. There was an edition of Advent. This is the Atlanta Science Fiction Organization Press, 1954, with an errata slip. But it is signed to Alistair Jury. Thanks for a pleasant day spent discussing everything but fandom. Best wishes, Sam Moskowitz, in 1989. Now, I believe Alistair Jury was an editor, science fiction editor at Golan's Publishing. And this is basically, it's a history of science fiction fandom, but mostly the big kerfuffle that was happening in 1930s New York for the most part. And it's a very interesting read. I've not read the full thing. I have read sections of it in the past. I've only recently, in the past couple of years, got an actual copy of this because I had read bits and pieces of it through a library copy, which was actually in pieces. Now we move on to, again, something that I'm putting in fandom because it's writings that were in fanzines. It's Robert Bloch's the eighth stage of fandom, selections from 25 years of writing. And Robert Bloch, as everybody knows, was the author of Psycho, but he also wrote science fiction and other weird sort of stories at times. And this is Advent Publishers. This is the publisher out of Chicago, which I really like. I have most of their publications. 1962. It's edited by Earl Kemp, who created Advent, and with an introduction by Wilson Tucker. And it's just a whole selection. And I think most of these were published in fanzines, I believe, or smaller magazines in general. They just cover a variety of topics, just anything he was interested in. Jabberwocky for fandom, The 7 Ages of Fan, Poe and Me, A Letter from Sally Ann Bloch, let's see here, Lost and Found Department, The Demolished Fan, Letter to a Convention Goer, just really, really cool little essays, articles that he had written. And another really good one, this is sort of, we'll see some of the books, well, anyway, I'll get to that in a second. This is Lester Del Rey's The World of Science Fiction. It's a history of the subculture. Sort of, it's a bit out of order here. It's sort of about the fandom, but also it's a history of science fiction. This was published by Ballantine Books, this edition, in 1979. And I forget how many. There was a uniform set, I think, of 40 books that were standard science fiction, what he classed as standard science fiction books, without jackets, by I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's Hyperion Press, but anyway, it was a. We'll get to. I've got a few of them. I've got Charles Fort. I think it is. I've got some of his volumes from this set. But yeah, this is a really good read, and it covers the period basically 1926 to 1956. So that actually should be moved up on my list. Not my list, but on my shelf here, because it's a little not quite fandom. Now we continue though with fandom. We got The Futurians by Damon Knight, and it's a history of the great science fiction family of the 30s that produced today's top SF writers. The Futurians were a group of many in New York City in the 30s. Asimov at various times was part of it. James Blish, Kornbluth, Merrill, Pohl, Shaw, Donald Wollheim, Daw Books were all part of this, and this is Damon Knight's history of it, because he was part of it too. It was founded in 1938 by 13 science fiction fans. Never numbered more than 20 fans. And there's Damon Knight there himself. We'll see Damon Knight show up as well. This is published by John Day, New York, 1977. So The Futurians. And one of two books here by a fan, basically, but it's All Our Yesterdays, Harry Warner Jr., introduction by Wilson Tucker again. This is a history of fandom in the 1940s. And this is, it's an informal history, it's classed as. It's Advent Publishers again, 1969. It has been published in various forms in small little booklets. That was prior to this as well, and there's been other editions of this, but I believe this was the first hardback printing of it. Second cloth printing, March 70. So this is second cloth printing, 1971, but originally was done in 1969. And then Harry Warner Jr. has gone on to do A Wealth of Fable, which is an informal history of science fiction fandom in the 1950s. And if you do a Google search, you will find him. He's honored at many conventions, and there are actually audio and video of him on panels and being honored at times, because this was a monumental sort of history. And this again was published, I believe, as pamphlets as well in its first place. And it's basically, this is a Sci-Fi Press, Van Nuys, California, edited by Dick Lynch, introduction by Wilson Tucker again, and this was published in 1992. But they got various publishing dates for this because of the pamphlet aspect of it. Now we continue with a couple more books. We're almost finished there. Science Fiction Fandom, edited by Joe Sanders. A very plain book, Greenwood pressed. This wouldn't have had a dust jacket. This is published, let's see here, 1994, and it's a variety of essays, roots of fandom in America, variations and echoes, social interactions, long-term results, and a bibliography and glossary, which is actually quite good. We've got, we got Sam Moskowitz, The Origins of Science Fiction Fandom, Reconstruction. Terry Jeeves, British Fandom. F.M. Busby, Fan Clubs, an example. Harry Warner Jr., History of Fanzines. We will get to some book about fanzines. Behind My Head, I think, actually. Richard A. Lupoff, Into the Ether, Junior Space Persons. Um, if I remember right, he did a really good book on Edgar Rice Burroughs as well. Robert Weinberg, Sandra Meisel, Howard DeVore. We will see a book by Howard DeVore over here, I think. He did a very, very interesting history of the Nebula and Hugo Awards with a lot of detail in them. It's not so much a history; it's a listing, but it's really, really good. Yeah, that's really good. Greenwood Press, as they say. And the last one is by Rob Hansen. It's Then, British Science Fiction or Science Fiction Fandom in the UK, 1930 to 1980. It's a paperback, and it's Ansible editions, and Ansible is Ursula K. Le Guin's instantaneous communication through the cosmos. At least I'm assuming that's what they took this from. And this was published in 2016. I think, well, it says, yeah, the Ansible Editions book published 2016. I think no, there was a hardcover, but I've never been able to see it. So I've got the paperback. And it's as the cover says, as the tin says, Science Fiction Fandom in the UK, 1930 to 1980. So there is the end of day one of 28 days of SF. So I'll try to do one every day, but they will be numbered sequentially as I go down the shelves. Thank you, BookTube.